It's time for the NFL playoffs. Let's do some individual team previews and give you like a team resume and all of the important information for each of these teams. Let's start with the Seattle Seahawks. They are one of the longest shots to win it all, plus 6,500 as we look at the odds to win the Pro Football Championship. This is over at Betfred Sportsbook, and we'll have all sorts of individual game previews and some individual team previews for you at Better Than Vegas. BTV bets. Let's talk about the Seahawks here. Seattle 9-8 straight up, 7-10 against the spread. Seattle has a couple wins this year against playoff teams. They beat the Chargers earlier in the year. They beat the Giants, some of their bad losses this year. Well, they did lose both of their games to San Francisco, who they will be playing in round one. They lost to Atlanta. They lost to Carolina. They got beat up by the Chiefs. Seattle is number 13 in EPA per play on offense. They're number 26 in EPA per play on defense. They're number 24 in the Pro Football Focus power rankings. They have the 26th ranked strength of schedule. They are number 10 overall in the DVOA metric, which they have the 14th best offensive DVOA, number 21 defensive DVOA. They are the number 4 ranked DVOA in special teams. They got off to a nice 6-3 start this year, and they did have a couple good wins in there. They beat the Lions, beat the Giants, beat the Chargers by 14, but then they lose 5 of their next 6 games before winning the final 2 games. They struggled throughout November and early December. They just couldn't run the ball well during that stretch. But Walker does look to be healthy again. He went for over 100 yards for the 3rd straight game to end the season with over 1,000 yards rushing. He had a season-high 29 carries last week, 114 yards, 7 runs for first downs, including a 20-yard run in overtime that put them at the 27-yard line and set them up for a field goal. They do have some injuries to some of the defensive players. Their linebacker Brooks and their nose tackle will have been banged up. That's going to make life a little more difficult for them. This is a team whose projected win total was 5.5 before the season. They were picked to finish last in the NFC West. They had the 4th longest odds just to make the playoffs. And one of the reasons why they've been overachieving this year is the rookies. They've had rookies start 70 games this year, which is tied for the most by any team since 1970. Geno Smith was a guy who we thought was a career backup. He's had a really nice year. He has struggled a little down the stretch. He threw 2 interceptions last week, nearly a third. But he did lead Seattle on a game-winning drive in overtime. This year, he set franchise records in completion percentage, pass attempts, and passing yards, becoming the first Seattle quarterback to lead the NFL in completion percentage since 1991. But over his last 8 games, he does have 10 turnovers. The game last week, it was rainy, and it could be rainy again this week against San Francisco. Both of the teams in last week's game didn't move the ball well. They went 5 of 25 combined on 3rd down. Seattle was only 1 of 11 on 3rd down. They had a chance to win the game at the end of regulation, but the kick hit the goalpost, and they had to go to overtime and win that game. They've done a nice job this year of creating turnovers. They forced 25 turnovers. One thing where they're very weak, stopping the run. They've allowed 8 different opponents to run for at least 160 yards this year. In both games against San Francisco, the Niners ran for 170 and then 180 yards. This offense for Seattle needs to be a little sharper than they were last week. On 3 different occasions, they settled for field goals in the red zone, including in a goal-to-go situation late in the 4th quarter. Their coverage unit, they allow just 5.9 yards per return, and they've netted 44-plus yards per punt, which was second best in the NFL. If they're going to win this game against San Fran or be competitive, those are things that they need to do well. Coverage, special team stuff, win on the margins. In both of the games against the Niners, they tried to run the ball on early downs. They were not successful doing so. It ended up putting them in 3rd and long situations and in obvious passing situations, and that makes it easy for a good defense like San Francisco to just tee off on you. They were pressured on 50% of their 3rd down dropbacks in the 2 games they played against San Francisco, and in those 3rd downs, they had an average of 10.7 yards to go. cannot put themselves in that position. They have to try something different. They have to try to use more play action. They only used it about 14% of their dropbacks in the first 2 games. They need to try other misdirection. We saw the Raiders do this when they played the 49ers. Screens, short stuff, wide receiver screens and play action. Lockett, his snap rate bounced back last week to 79%. This week, he should be the primary target for Geno's aerial attack. He had a 21+% target share and a 29% air yard share this season. So you can attack the 49ers zone-based coverage scheme. Their top corners have operated in zone over 60% of their snaps, and Lockett ranks 12th in Pro Football Focus receiving grade, 15th in yards per route run against zone. He will run about 56% of his routes against Ward, and it's a good fit for him. Now, the counter to that will be the weather. If it is wet and they can't throw the ball, it's going to make it hard to get the ball down the field to Lockett. So they may have to try to get creative and get the ball in his hands in some different ways. But you can beat the 49ers through the air. Now, for Seattle, back in week 15, San Francisco was just a 3.5-point favorite on the road at Seattle. And in this game, they're almost a 10-point favorite now. The offensive line is really struggling for Seattle. They're 30th in adjusted line yards created, 24th in run block win rate. There are ways they can attack the Niners offensively and defensively, but they need to make some adjustments. Will they make those adjustments? They need to blitz a little bit more. They need to be more creative on first down. Can they do it? Will they do it? We'll see. But altogether, it's been a very good year and an impressive year for a team that nobody expected to be here right now. The Seattle Seahawks, they are one of the longest shots to win the Super Bowl, plus 6,500 right now over at Betfred Sportsbook.